All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from me. Lots of gems, lots of accents, lots of the best hair in all of Kung Fu. Let's get to it.
And every day I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Sifu, I am Gucci Chazy.
Yeah, that's right. We're
HK.
It feels a little different today,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Yeah, we're in Hong Kong. It's like a real thing. The Kung Fu Genius in Hong Kong. This is like
New York City is 5 a.m.
5 a.m.
So, but my crash is not as
Are you gonna fall asleep by the end of this?
maybe.
You might maybe feel a little bit different, maybe look a little bit different by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, possible.
I
So,
might fall asleep before the end of this.
yeah, you're definitely. He's like Mikey famously falls asleep in the
Every
middle of the
episode.
podcast. Yeah,
No one knows though.
that's right.
Only we know.
Yeah, he's off camera, so people
Yeah.
don't know that he's asleep half
No
the time
clue.
when he's recording.
I
Yeah,
have no idea where I am half the time.
yeah. So
I
here,
just realized that.
Yeah, so here we are with another Ask Me Anything episode. This time we have special questions from our audience. They can't see it right now, but we have a
live studio
We have a
audience.
live studio audience, and
Okay.
we're going to take some questions. And but before we get started, just want to let everyone know that the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius is on Patreon. Patreon.com/the Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to episodes early and higher levels of support. Get all sorts of wild stuff: Instagram
Wild.
subscriber reels, special videos,
Very wild.
historical takes,
Super wild.
all sorts of stuff. And if you don't want to support us on Patreon, you can support us here on YouTube with YouTube memberships.
If you don't want to support us on Patreon, you get the boring shit.
That's yeah, you just get the normal.
Yeah.
You just get this crap,
that
right?
whackness.
But if you support us on Patreon
Yeah.
or on YouTube, you
get the
then you get the
wild
yeah.
stuff.
Then as our good friend Ron Van Cleef would say, you get the real shit, baby. So that's definitely the way to do it. So we appreciate all your support. And if you don't want to support us on Patreon or YouTube, don't forget to
Yes.
subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss an episode. And there you go. So Dre,
Okay.
what do you got for me today?
I have a question for my Sifu.
Okay, who's that? It's
Sifu
me.
Alex Richter.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So, I think everyone knows the first time you've been to Hong Kong.
What do
Right?
you mean everyone knows? I
Kinda.
don't know if everyone knows. Did I
Kinda.
really talk about that?
Yeah, you've talked about it here and
All right.
there. You
Okay.
met Sammo Hung,
That's right.
you know, on that trip.
He never
and
stops
it's-
talking
it's
about it.
Pretty much changed your life, right? What about the second time you've been to Hong Kong? Wait, time out. You've been to Hong Kong almost 30 times.
I think this is either my 27th or 28th trip to Hong Kong.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's a lot
To
of
me, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a
I'm
lot of
trying to
flying.
catch
yes.
up.
You do you want me to detail every single one of those 27 trips?
No, just the second time.
Second time.
Because you get here, you're a little, 18-year-old.
My first trip I was
Yeah.
18, yeah.
And then when was the next trip?
The next trip wasn't until a bunch of years later. So there was a big gap between my first trip because my parents paid for my first trip.
Yeah.
My second trip I had to pay on my own. So that took me a little while, right?
Okay, you had to save up. Okay,
that
okay.
actually wasn't my second trip. Wasn't until I started teaching Wing Chun. So I had the school for about 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife at the time. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Was from Taiwan.
Okay.
And so we went to go visit her family in Taiwan, and then that was the way I was able. So I took a flight from Taiwan.
I didn't mean to bring that up then.
That doesn't matter. I am no master of the marital arts. I'm
okay,
only
okay.
the Kung Fu Genius.
Okay,
all
got
right. So
Old wounds.
I flew from Taiwan to Hong Kong for a short trip to do some training with Sifu Leung Tang. And so my second trip was actually a short one because I was basically in Taiwan and I did a short trip over here for about, I think just 3 or 4 days. Did a couple instructor classes. It was relatively unremarkable trip as far as that goes. But yeah, so that's
Any interesting things happening on that trip that blew your
no,
mind?
No,
'Cause it was the second time
I
back.
stayed in a guest house with a bunch of mainland Chinese guys, and I was the only. It was a bunch of mainland Chinese guys and me. We shared a bathroom. It was on Nathan Road. It was a very interesting experience, but otherwise, it was a relatively unremarkable trip. So, all right, Dre, what else you got for me?
Okay, so Sifu, I want to know how much truth is behind the legend of the origin of
Wait,
Wing Chun.
wait. What's that accent?
Dre,
I just-
every once in a while, Dre comes up with these goofy ass accents.
Yeah,
I
like,
have
what,
no
the,
idea
what
why.
the hell is that?
Yeah.
Seems a bit offensive to Austrians.
It's like the worst Austrian
Is it?
accent I've
Yes,
ever heard.
That's awful.
Right? Yeah, not even remotely authentic.
No, absolutely. Klaus Maria Brandauer would be very upset.
That's right.
Should
So what was the question again?
So, how much truth is behind the legend of the origin of Wing Chun? So, regarding Muay and Wing Chun.
Okay, so how much of that is true?
Yeah.
So the legend of Wing Chun, basically the nun Muay who taught Yin Wing Chun, who then taught her husband, and so on and so forth. So I would say probably none of that is true. Probably about 0% of it is true. It is a legend, like many of the origin stories of most Chinese martial arts. And if you look at a lot of the Southern styles, you will even see some of the same characters pop up in the different styles. And there's like a lot of homework copying going on between the various legends of the styles. I don't think they actually can know really who the founder was. I think it's a similar problem to some origins of most sects and religions, is they will usually backdate their origin much further to make it seem older, to make it seem more I suppose, established than it is. So it's quite common that founders, whether I suppose in this case of a martial arts style, but of a sect or of a religion, to make it seem like it's been around for a while, they'll usually backdate their history quite a bit. I don't think Wing Chun under that name is nearly as old as the fairy tale would suggest. And I certainly don't believe that there was a female nun in a monastery of male monks. I'm not quite sure about a lot of the parts of the story that seem a little bit convenient. In general, when history sounds like a narrative, like a story, it's probably not true. Because whenever you relay history, they're normally not told in stories where you have a good guy and a bad guy and some drama and a setup and, you know, the hero's journey and so on and so forth. Whenever a history sounds like narrative fiction, that's usually a telltale sign that it's probably not true. Because if such a story were true, the facts would be told in a very different way. They wouldn't be told like as if it's some kind of movie or fairy tale or fairy book story. So does that make you feel disappointed if I tell you that, like, is this like finding out the tooth fairy's not real? If I tell you that Yin Wing Chun isn't real, like, will that really upset you, Dre? Or are you okay with that?
I'm totally fine with that.
Totally fine with that? All right.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know Wing Chun Illustrated is now offering a paperback edition through Amazon, reaching a larger global market. And no, they're not ditching the glossy magazine edition through MagCloud. You can now simply choose the version of this magazine you prefer and the one with the cheapest shipping wherever you live. Order your copy of Wing Chun Illustrated today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping for Prime members. Go and check that out.
What's next up, Dre? What do you got for me?
I would like to see our Wing Chun community, all the lineage evolve in the future.
Yes.
What is it with Dre today?
So with the accents, man.
Like,
It's the worst French accent I ever heard. First was that awful Austrian accent. And now is he trying to do Peter Sellers or something like that?
Yeah, I thought it was like maybe
it's weather of Hong Kong. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I feel like we're going to lose some audience.
Spicy
like
food.
members.
I don't know.
You know?
Yeah.
That spicy food will get you to change accents or, tell inner secrets, as far as I've heard. You know what I mean?
Dre's always trying to mix it up by doing different things. Sometimes I guess today it's all about the accents, right?
Absolutely.
So, so basically your question is, what do I think about the Wing Chun community, or bringing them together, or what?
Yes.
I think it would be a good idea in theory. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. Unfortunately, the community vibe in martial arts is usually within a school and occasionally between some schools. I think in general, there's unfortunately a lot of fragmentation and a lot of politics, and everyone wants to be a large community. Everyone wants to be friendly with each other, but I think that there's an unfortunate factor of human nature that makes it a little bit difficult. I think, not to use an overused word, but I think there's a lot of really toxic elements within the Wing Chun community in general. I think the best thing for Wing Chun instructors to do is to create the atmosphere within their own schools that they wish existed within the Wing Chun community in general. So rather than complaining about the Wing Chun community not being together or complaining about the politics or how no one gets along, you can, I suppose, as Krishnamurti said, you should be the light onto the world that you want to see, right? So if you create a community within your school, when people visit your school and they see that they're welcomed, that the training is cool, there's no weird vibes, there's no, oh, you come from that guy, huh? And they're welcomed with open arms. The training is good. The training is professional. I think that is a way to set an example. So maybe that can kind of go into other schools and infect it, I suppose, and change it. But I think trying to change the Wing Chun community as a whole is difficult because you have so many divergent personalities. It's also not unique to Wing Chun. You know, I often get the question like, how come Wing Chun politics are so bad? And usually that's just a matter of you haven't looked at other martial arts at all. I don't know a single martial art of note that doesn't have some type of politics, some more, some less. I suppose it depends how widespread that martial art is. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has a lot of politics. You have different camps, even in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You have, a certain segment that focuses mainly on Jiu-Jitsu for self-defense, another segment that focuses on sport fighting, and sometimes these two have quite radical arguments about how Jiu-Jitsu should be taught. Kempo Karate, after the death of Ed Parker, there were a lot of fights about who the new successor was. So Wing Chun is not at all unique in that. It's just that I think when people do Wing Chun, they're more sensitive to the politics within that style. I know it might sound perhaps a little cynical, but I kind of gave up on the Wing Chun community a very long time ago. I find that I have my most productive conversations with people from other martial arts styles because there's always this kind of a little bit of like chest puffing when sometimes when you talk to other Wing Chun people, like, oh, you come from this guy, you come from that guy. And then there's always this kind of like, you're sometimes a little guarded about what you say because you don't know, what that guy's vibe is. And I find that you very rarely have productive conversations about Wing Chun. But I find, like, for example, when I come here to the Martial Club and visit, for example, Maxifu, and I have the chance to hear him talk about martial arts, or I have the chance to discuss martial arts with him, I learn more sometimes, not just about other martial arts through his expertise, but also more about my own. I've told the story many times that I think maybe the first or second time I had met Maxifu, he was explaining to me the difference between hard styles and soft styles. And he contextualized it on the way the forms are structured in those different styles. And then he made a really interesting observation about Wing Chun forms being somewhere in between. So it wasn't a matter of it being either a hard style or a soft style, but more of it like a spectrum. And that we had within the Wing Chun form certain characteristics of both. And I had never heard it explained that way before from any Wing Chun Sifu. And so I find that I've learned so much about Chinese martial arts, Southern martial arts, Wing Chun, and also other martial arts from having fantastic conversations, for example, with Maxifu, much more so than I think I've had having conversations with other Wing Chun people, including those within my own lineage. So I think maybe that's the answer for the Wing Chun community, is to get out a little bit and see what else is out there as well. And then maybe try to bring that type of community back into Wing Chun. So yeah, it's pretty much all I got to say about that topic. What else you got for me, Dre?
So, Sifu,
Yes.
in your opinion,
Uh-huh.
what do you think the difference is in the Jeet Kune Do Wing Chun
Okay.
and the Wing Chun that you practice,
Oh, God.
and the Wing Chun that you learned from James the Mile?
Oh, wow. Let's go right into the politics right here. Sure.
After some throat
Jeez,
clearing,
Dre, you're
maybe.
busting my balls today with these questions. And what's
Wait,
with
wait,
the
wait.
accent changes?
Yeah, wait. Like at least he's not doing like some kind of European accent trying to
Yeah.
sound cosmopolitan.
Now
This
he's
is-
trying to sound more New York than usual.
Yeah, look, it looks like classic Dre, but there's something off about it.
Yeah. You've been working out, Dre?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Sifu,
Been hitting the gym? All right. So wow, that's a really good question. First of all, I'm not an expert in the Wing Chun as taught in Jeet Kune Do, because although I did a little bit of Jeet Kune Do training when I was a teenager, from what I've seen, it varies quite a bit depending on the teacher. So from the Inosanto line, the Wing Chun that they teach might be a little bit different from those who come from Ted Wong, might be different from those who come from James Yim Lee or from Taki Kimura. So I think it's impossible to say the Wing Chun taught in Jeet Kune Do is like XYZ. Obviously, the main difference between all of those variations is it's on a different framework, because if you're using a fencing style lead for distance, then that's going to change how you get into the Wing Chun. But as far as, I suppose, commenting any more than that, I don't want to get in trouble with any of my JKD friends because they have their own issues and I don't really want to be a part of that. And obviously, classical Wing Chun or Leung Teng Wing Chun or whatever you want to call what I do is quite a bit different from that, because we're not using that side-on, more fencing style frame. The assumption is that we're already quite close. So one of the main differences between sort of the classical Wing Chun framework and JKD is that we're not coming from a kickboxing framework. So the idea is not like you're there, I'm here, we're going to go back and forth, I'm going to measure distance, find my entry, and do my Wing Chun. Classical Wing Chun is like, hey, you're in front of me, I'm in front of you, you want to fight, we just go. There's not like a lot of back and forth and, you know, measuring distance and 5 ways of attack. It almost presumes that you're standing in front of me, we have some kind of beef, and the fight is going to start. There's usually not a whole lot of pre-fight going on. The James DeMille stuff that I did, which I learned through John Bial, who was a student of James DeMille and a student of Ed Hart, is a little bit closer in framework to Wing Chun than JKD. Because that stuff came from what Bruce Lee was teaching in the States right when he came from Hong Kong. So that early Seattle time period was much closer to Wing Chun than what he would maybe later do in Oakland and then in LA Chinatown. So you can almost see a through line of it being more like Wing Chun at first, and then it having, I know it's not an accurate term, but it becoming a little bit more like a kickboxing frame a little bit later. So when I learned that as a teenager in Seattle, we didn't do a whole lot of like kind of back and forth. There were no like straight leads from distance or anything like that. It was still like, you're there, I'm here, you're going to take a swing at me and I'm going to go and do my thing. So I would say that in certain respects, the non-classical Kung Fu or the Wing Chun Do or the pre-Jeet Kune Do era Wing Chun that Bruce Lee taught was certainly closer to what I learned in the Leung Teng system, although not like exactly the same, but in terms of the basic idea, than JKD.
Even the Zhong Fan Kung Fu.
Yes, absolutely, because it's mainly about the body positioning and framework, and in at least in Leung Teng Wing Chun, you know, when we get in close, we really want to jam our opponent's ability to punch us with a second hand or to kick. So when we go in, I don't just want to tag you with a punch. I want to really swarm your entire body, stick with the legs so you can't kick me, stick to your arm and stick to you, and watch out for your backhand. So we really want to swarm and stick and prevent multiple strikes. Sometimes, and this may be just my experience, the way I see some JKD people, not necessarily Bruce Lee, but some of the people who do it in the name of Bruce Lee, they use some of the Wing Chun stuff as an entry, like almost like they're just trying to tag the guy. And that's a huge divergence from the way I understand Wing Chun. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's not necessarily the way I would teach it. We're like a swarming style of Wing Chun as opposed to a tagging style. And that would naturally change the ideas of pressure and chi sao, footwork, angles, whether you're just trying to tag someone or whether you're trying to go in and shut them down. So yeah, I suppose there's some things that are similar, some things that are different. That was a very insightful question, and I'm glad that, yes.
I have a addition. So can I ask if the concept of Pak Sao, Lap Sao, straight blast is similar or same or different?
Well, obviously the root of all those techniques come from Wing Chun. I suppose for most people, you could say that they're really similar. For Kung Fu nerds, which might be some of our audience, the difference is always in the details. So, for example, the position of the hand, the way we stick with the forearm rather than just trying to hit with the fist, those are pretty significant changes. Although the idea of overwhelming someone with chain punches is the same in both, but the method by which each style will go about it, the JKD style is perhaps a slightly more athletic expression of that, because you have to remember, we never saw Bruce Lee older than 32. So you see someone who's at the peak of his physical prowess, who's able to use extreme attributes, speed, fast reflexes, obviously strength, flexibility. Those are a lot of the attributes of a younger fighter. And Bruce was also a lighter weight fighter. Lighter weight fighters are usually much faster. If you look in MMA, boxing, the lighter weight classes are much more exciting and much quicker. But as I mentioned before, there's also a distinction between the lighter weight classes and the heavier weight classes. Fighters in lighter weight classes generally don't last as long in their career as heavyweight fighters, because the moment a lighter weight fighter starts getting a little older or past their peak, they don't have the same speed, they don't have those same attributes, and because they don't have size, they may not have the power to knock out another young fighter at the lighter weights. So lighter weight classes tend to, those fighters tend to not last as long. Heavyweights, whether in boxing or MMA, some of them can have a career even into their 40s, because a lot of heavyweight fighting is not really based on speed and those kind of like fast twitch reflexes. They're based on sheer overwhelming power. So they can have a career much longer than a lighter weight fighter. And we never saw Bruce Lee get past this prime where he would have to start adjusting his JKD based on the fact that he would not still have the same attributes he had at 32 or younger. I think that's the unfortunate part about him passing away, because he was such a brilliant mind in martial arts. I really would have liked to have seen what he would have done as he got older, as he no longer had the speed and the same physical capabilities, because I'm 100% sure that he would have changed the way he did JKD to match the what we call age-related decline that is inevitable in all of us, and that perhaps he would have gone more to like a grappling style of, use the entries to go in and grapple the person when he's no longer able to do those fast shots. And I it's something I think about all the time. What would a 45-year-old Bruce Lee, what would his expression of JKD have been with the extra years of experience, with him naturally having to adapt it as his attributes slowed down? That I think that's the kind of nerdy stuff I think about all the time. Yeah, great question. Well, that's a uncharacteristically good question, Dre, because as far as I could tell, we're not taking these questions from Patreon.
No.
These seem to be coming straight from Dre.
I know, I'm actually shocked, but there's also, it's weird because some of them are great and some of them, oh no, the questions are great, but he's off color.
So, Sifu, would that be JKD concepts?
Don't even ask me about that. I'm not getting into any of that stuff. I did those episodes a few weeks ago, and I'm not going back into that pool. All right, Dre, what else you got for me?
So, Sifu, I have a question about community and behavior.
What? Have you been practicing? Have you been taking received pronunciation lessons behind my back?
We're in Hong Kong. I've taken a few etiquette classes.
But
Wow.
that's
Dre is leveling up. He's gunning for your position.
Yes.
You are no longer the most sophisticated person on this podcast
I'm
anymore.
not sure how I feel about this. Your
Wow.
English accent is flawless. It's better than mine.
Yeah. Well, I don't even need you anymore now. When
Well,
we got Dre talking like
Look, if you're going to fire me, at least wait until the end of the podcast.
okay,
Please.
we'll keep you to the end. All right,
Okay.
Dre. So what is your question?
Yes, it's never too late to be civilized and polite. So my question is this. So, Sifu, you talked about the atmosphere of the community earlier in the podcast. So my question is that we imagine the Wing Chun community to be we know the Wing Chun community to be a very large one, and that the study of Wing Chun is composed of many standardized practices, for instance, Qisao. So what this means to me is that a certain level of behavioral control is expected of members of a community or a school. We cannot do whatever we want, we cannot say whatever we want, and that there are many times resentment may be created, and disputes may be had. So in the face of all this, how can we be polite?
Wow. I almost feel like you are more qualified to answer that question than I am.
That's a great question.
That is a very challenging problem because at least in Wing Chun, we are not just performing, for example, like some Tai Chi people may focus more on the form, but maybe they don't have that much physical contact. But in Wing Chun, there's a lot of physical practice, and it's very easy for things to get a little heated, especially when you have visitors who may not come from the same background and may have different expectations about what is acceptable in terms of control or etiquette or dealing with other people in the class. That is a constant challenge that needs to be monitored by all the instructors who are present, and the instructors need to be aware of the specific challenges that happen within Wing Chun schools. One disadvantage we have in striking arts that they have in grappling arts is, for example, if you catch me in a position where I can no longer do anything, you have me in an arm lock, I will tap and you will let go, hopefully. But with striking arts, we don't have the same thing. So the level of what is considered acceptable force is very individual. So the way we do it in our school is just discussing on the use of force or excessive force is we make sure that the partners dialogue with each other and that they can be very open about what they feel is acceptable in terms of the intensity of training, and that may change day to day. So at our school, we use controlled force, and we're very conscious about not doing anything with full power. We train with our partners. We don't train on our partners. But even there, even while using controlled force, you may come into the gym one day in a mood where you just don't really feel like getting hit above a certain level. And on those days, you just tell your partner, could we just take it a little easier today? I had kind of a rough day. I just want to go a little light. And the school's atmosphere should be such that that is completely acceptable. So there needs to be a dialogue between the two partners. That way, the Chiu, the sparring, the fighting, whatever it is, doesn't exceed what people feel like doing in terms of control on that day. And I think that if we can make sure that the physical training is done like that, that attitude will spread to the general atmosphere of the school, where people should feel free if they're to say if they feel uncomfortable, in any kind of training situation that they may not feel like doing it that day. However, if the instructor does a good job and the instructor keeps an eye on the students in class, they usually should be able to prevent these things from happening to begin with. So the instructor's job is very different from that of the student. For me, it's very important that the instructors get their own training separately from the time that they're in the class. Some Wing Chun schools, there's no separation. The teacher is also getting in their training, which means sometimes they're just beating on the students, and that's their training, but they really should be teaching. And in my school, we make sure that when my instructors are teaching, they're just there in the capacity of more or less a service provider. They're there to make sure that everyone has a good time, everyone learns, everyone feels safe, and everyone feels comfortable. And when they leave, everyone got a good sweat on, they had a great time, and they want to come back. So the instructor's job is to make sure that they're basically like a maestro of atmosphere. They make sure that the atmosphere stays at high energy and everyone is civil and everyone is kind and everyone's having a good time. When it's their time for training, they come to the instructor class with me, and that's when they can get in their own sparring so that the students never feel like they're just a bunch of punching bags for the instructors, and the instructors can be 100% focused on what I consider the most important thing, more important than the technique, is the atmosphere of the class. And when the atmosphere is good, people generally tend to be polite. People generally tend to not get upset, even if their partner perhaps hits them somewhat excessively. If you know it wasn't malicious, you won't get upset. Like, oh man, you're trying to kill me today. Can you go a little easier? If you can retort with that kind of level of humor, then you know that the atmosphere is good. So that is a constant thing. That's not something that can be solved by a simple rule change. That's something that's constantly monitored. However, I'm not sure, did I answer your question as you asked it?
You have.
Okay, good. I feel a little intimidated because your level of English is much higher than mine. And I'm not used to this from you, Dre.
This is a very, very strange experience for both of us.
Yes. I think he used the gun for my position, but now we think he's coming for your position.
I think he might be coming for both of our positions. This is not cool, bro.
Are you a Wing Chun instructor that needs some extra guidance in your own training? My private online Wing Chun training offers a multitude of benefits for instructors. Here are some of those benefits. 1, access to expert guidance, namely me. With my experience teaching instructors from all over the world, I can create a program just for you, whether it's the details of the advanced Wing Chun, something more fundamental, or just to help you create a program for your own students. 2, flexible learning. The training can be worked around your schedule and what's most convenient for you. I don't charge extra if you bring a training partner to do the lesson with you, so bring that partner and you can get more benefit, and I can teach the two of you how to train together. 3, comprehensive curriculum. Whether you want to teach in a more traditional way or you want to upgrade your material to a more modern style, I can help you create the perfect program for your students and for yourself. And 4, personalized coaching. This program will be exactly what you're interested in without any fluff or blah, blah, blah to run things out. We get right to it, and I want you to be happy with the improvements to your training and to the curriculum. Don't miss out on these incredible benefits. Enroll in online Wing Chun private training with me and take your Wing Chun skills to the next level. Use the code KFG online to get a 15% discount on monthly subscriptions for either 2 or 4 lessons a month. Use the link in the description below. Don't forget to use the code KFG online to get that 15% discount on the subscription of your choice as soon as possible. And I will see you online.
All right, Dre, what else you got for me?
Wait. You look very familiar.
Really?
You look like
Yo.
a Hong Kong movie legend.
Really?
Yeah.
Legend or legend?
No, legend. apparently.
See,
You know, Steve, Dre brings it
that's right.
from the street.
That's right.
You know, no one sounds more ghetto than me, right?
Never before.
Except maybe my sons, Calvin and Kyle, a.k.a. Faith and Hope. Anyway, Dre has kids. Do you not know
Well,
this?
Dre's got kids.
We've suspected as
kids?
much. Yes.
Of all colors. They're like a bag full of M&Ms. So, literally in the case of Faith and Hope. So, anyway, my question is this. How do you think Wing Chun, as it is taught and trained, has changed between Fatsan and Hong Kong and then on into the West, and let's say New York for, sake of reference, because that's where your school is. Right. How do you think the art has changed between these 3 locales in its development?
Wow, so eloquent. Dre's really stepping it up again. This is
it's amazing.
He must be taking some alpha brain or something like that while he's over here.
Yep.
Well, that's a fantastic question. So I think the art has changed in many forms, not just the way it's taught. I think the individual forms have developed over time. I think the Chiu methods have developed over time. But I would say probably the main change from Wing Chun from the old days, from Fatsan, perhaps to Hong Kong, then to, let's say to the mean streets of New York, is, according to legend, Wing Chun was traditionally designed to fight against other martial arts styles. So that would mean that perhaps in the Fatsan days, the martial arts that they would focus on would be the local martial arts in the Fatsan area, so that they made sure that they were teaching their students not just to Chiu with the other Wing Chun classmates, but also how to defend the attacks of the other arts that were in the area, so that if they were challenged by them, they would be well equipped to fight those styles. That changed from Fatsan to Hong Kong, because then, although they're obviously still dealing with Kung Fu styles in Hong Kong, the specific schools and styles that are in Hong Kong are a little bit different. So I remember my late friend, Sifu Chan Chi Man, told me that in the early days when he would walk arm in arm with Grandmaster Yip Man in the streets of Sam Soi Po, occasionally Grandmaster Yip Man would attack him using some combinations from Choi Lei Fut. And he said that he was quite cheeky in that he would randomly attack him to make sure that he was ready. And all of those attacks came from the other local martial arts, mainly Choi Lei Fut. It seemed that Yip Man, perhaps because of Choi Lei Fut being almost the opposite of what Wing Chun is, wanted to make sure that the students were ready for that. So he had a couple pre-canned combinations that he would throw at the students randomly to see how they would react. So that was something that Grandmaster Yip Man would do in Hong Kong, purportedly. Nowadays, at least in New York, my students are not necessarily going to be faced with a practitioner of another Kung Fu style. Nowadays, they may have to fight someone who's done some boxing or kickboxing or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or wrestling. So although we still teach the classical applications, the classical format that Wing Chun was always taught in, the forms, the Chiu, the applications, the sparring, the weapons, the wooden dummy, everything, when we do the sparring in our school, we focus on Wing Chun versus non-Wing Chun. And I see a lot of Wing Chun schools, the only way they do sparring is usually through Chiu. And that is very incestuous. It's just Wing Chun versus Wing Chun. But I think to keep Wing Chun authentic, you need to make sure you're fighting against other styles and the local styles. So for us, that is boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling. So it's for that reason that I also train in those arts. I train with Magno Gama from Renzo Gracie. Done jiu-jitsu, done kickboxing. And we make sure that when we do the sparring, we teach our students how to do the attacks that they're most likely to face on the street, and then learn to use their Wing Chun against that, so that they know how they're going to be attacked by the more modern styles without changing the framework, only changing who we're teaching them to fight against. So I would say that's probably something that has always been there in the development of Wing Chun, in addition to all the little nitpicky details and changes. It's who were we training the students to fight against? I would be very curious if I could go back in time to see how they did it in the old days, and to see if they really just did Chiu training as sparring, or if they did some type of practice against other martial arts. I would have loved to have seen that. I can only speculate that they did something like that, but that's...
Were there any extra forms or weapons that didn't make the jump from Fatsan to Hong Kong?
So that's a somewhat controversial topic, because there is a lot of research now to indicate that the Bat Jam Do was actually created by Grandmaster Yip Man. Because prior to Grandmaster Yip Man, you don't find a double knife form by the specific name of Bat Jam Do before Yip Man's time. In Fatsan, the only other knife that was taught was in the U.S.A lineage, which is a lineage of Wing Chun that is not directly related to Yip Man. And they just called it Sang Do, like double knives. But they didn't use this specific terminology. So there is some speculation that Yip Man may be the person who developed the Bat Jam Do. And maybe just it's a sin of omission that he didn't want to say he was the one who created it. It's based largely off of the fist fighting techniques. So rather than it being an accretion from another martial art into Wing Chun, it seems to be an in-house development. When you look at the way we use the knives, we have, you see the Bong Do and all the movements from the fist fighting sets. So there is a lot of evidence that may confirm that he created it. So that would mean he most likely only learned the pole in Fatsan. And we know from some of Leung Jan's later students that they only taught the pole. When Leung Jan retired and moved to the Gulo village, the only weapon he taught was the pole. So if anything, Grandmaster Yip Man perhaps added one weapon. But I know there are other lineages in mainland China which have other weapons as well, including some flexible weapons. But it's difficult to tell whether that was an import from another style or whether that was an in-house development. I can only speak for what I have heard in Yip Man Wing Chun.
Solid, Sif.
All right, Dre, so what do you got for me next?
Sifu, I am very happy I am able to ask you, the Kung Fu Genius, some questions today. I hear there is also Chiu in Hung Gar. So I would like to ask what the difference is between the Chiu of Hung Gar and that of Wing Chun, and where the practice of Hung Gar's Chiu comes from. I am unsure about the origins of Hung Gar's Chiu practice, but my Sifu did teach me this Chiu, the Hung Gar version. I also explored the Chiu practices of other Kung Fu traditions, such as that of Tai Chi. We all know that Tai Chi has Chiu. I also looked into Wing Chun's Chiu. What I found is this. I feel that Hung Gar's Chiu, or perhaps the Chiu my Sifu taught me, is more similar to the Chiu practices of Tai Chi and most external martial arts, and is completely different from the Chiu of Wing Chun. Wing Chun's Chiu is quite different from that of Tai Chi and other Kung Fu. Our Hung Gar Chiu is similar to Tai Chi's Chiu in that we cannot break from our hold of the opponent to strike them. We must stick to our opponent's arms whilst gaining an advantageous position and then attack from there. The Chi-Sao of Wing Chun is different in that one might break from sticking to the opponent's arms to attack them directly. This is the greatest difference between the two sorts of Chi-Sao. It is because of this, Wing Chun's Chi-Sao resembles combat much more, as though techniques are being used in a fight. Of course, you still should not strike the opponent hard, otherwise no one will want to practice with you the next time. I would say that Hung Gar's Chi-Sao is completely different from Wing Chun's Chi-Sao. In Wing Chun's Chi-Sao, there is much Luk-Sao, breaking away from sticking to the opponent. Following a sequence of Luk-Sao, one might execute a Lap-Sao, and the free hand strikes the opponent. Stop here, just like that. But Hung Gar's Chi-Sao, like that of Tai Chi and other external martial arts, forbids you from breaking away from the opponent to strike them. Contrarily, we wind while sticking to the opponent's arms, and once we gain positional advantage in the opponent's center line, we strike the opponent while sticking to them, or push them away, or execute a joint lock. This is how Hung Gar's Chi-Sao is different from that of Wing Chun. I thank the Kung Fu genius for answering my question. I have another question. Sifu, why are you so handsome? How are you able to make your hair so tall and well-shaped?
None of your business.
All right, Dre, so what else you got for me?
Wait. What the hell just happened?
Nothing. Everything's cool. What are you talking about?
Nah, something really crazy just happened.
Have you been drinking?
I mean, yeah, of course I have, but that's got nothing to do with anything.
I think it might. Everything's going. This is one of the smoothest podcasts I've ever done. It's also one of the most normal episodes we've ever done.
I know.
I think you had a rough night last night. You just might be projecting a little bit. Everything's going fine.
Okay.
Right, Dre? Everything's going fine. So everything's good. All right, Dre, what do you have for me?
Yes, Sifu. I have another question.
Okay.
How did Luk Tim Bung Wan came to Wing Chun?
Oh, Jesus. Wow. Everyone's hit me with the historical questions this time. So that's a very good question. The problem is that really before Yip Man, even when we're talking about Chanwa Son, Yip Man Sifu, it's very difficult to say because there are no written records. There are no scrolls left anywhere. There's no record of the history. And even most of the oral stories that we've heard are, they're told again and again and again and again. And these stories get changed over time. So supposedly the long pole came in during the time of Leung Yitai. So Leung Chan had two instructors, Leung Yitai and Wong Hua Bo. Leung Yitai supposedly was the one who brought the pole into it. But that's the official story. That's the fairy tale, but it's difficult to say whether that's true. I'm just going to assume it is because I don't know anything. I haven't heard anything that would say that it's not true. The problem is that really before Leung Chan's time, we start to get the history gets really iffy and sketchy. So I'm very reticent to mention any characters from before that time. It's there's really nothing but a bunch of old stories. What's interesting though is that the Lok Tim Bun Kwan in Wing Chun has been modified to follow some of the Wing Chun ideas. So when you look at for example, what Maxifu teaches, man, we should get Maxifu on the podcast. What do you think? At some point we should get him on the podcast.
Yeah,
that'd be really great.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
I don't know if he'll do it though.
Yeah, he might not. So if you look at the older versions of Lok Tim Bun Kwan, for example, what they teach in Hung Gar, like they have in the Lam Sai Wing lineage, that, in my opinion, is a much older and much more original version of Lok Tim Bun Kwan than what we do in Wing Chun, because Wing Chun people, once they get their hands on something, they like to make it their own, and so the Lok Tim Bun Kwan that we do in Wing Chun is highly modified to the Wing Chun idea. So I'm very lucky because I've had the chance to see the video of Grandmaster Yip Man performing the long pole form, the one that was shot in 1967 by Tang Sang. So in addition to learning the long pole from my teachers, I also got to see Grandmaster Yip Man's long pole form. And while it's obviously very similar in the basic structure, you have the three-pronged structure, very similar to the way Maxifu shows it. There are a lot of little details that would indicate that these are Wing Chun ideas that crept into the long pole. Before I started learning a little bit about the older, or I should say the Hung Gar version of the Loktin Bunguan, I was convinced that what we did in Wing Chun was the original one and the standard one, so to speak. But after having seen Maxivu show the long pole and see the details, I can see where some things were changed. And there are also a lot of things that I actually prefer in the way Maxivu does the long pole over the way we do them in Wing Chun. But to say who brought it in exactly is something that I'm not sure anyone can say with confidence. People can just name the people from our supposed lineage tree, but whether we really know for sure, I'm very agnostic about those kind of claims. I think that when it comes to history that's older than 100 years, we have to be very happy with just saying, we don't know, and there may be no way to find out. It's just something that, we have to be comfortable with not knowing these things.
Have you gone back to being Austrian again, Dre?
Yeah,
No.
He's been changing his accent the whole time.
He's he's morphing back. At least this time he's bald again.
Yeah.
So I
crazy.
don't know what happened. I wake up in the morning and it was there.
Yeah. Well, at least he's still bald.
Yes.
Okay, Dre, what do you got for me now?
Hey, Sifu, I had some things just come to mind. I wanted to just run by you, see if.
All right.
See if,
Wait. What accent is this now?
this is
This is South Bronx, I think.
this is a southern African accent. Yeah.
Oh, so we're doing cultural appropriation now,
Yeah,
aren't we, Dre?
so Dre, yeah.
Jesus.
Dre's trying to get us canceled
He's
here.
going
All
to
right.
get us cancelled here. What
All
the
right.
hell?
All right, Dre, what do you got?
First one was earlier when you were talking about the different Wing Chun types.
Yes.
I just thought to ask you, with all the historic relation to the forms
Yes.
that have been in place for a long time, as the style evolves, if a new incorporation of a form or a movement is to come in to the style, who would be the body or the place that gets approved?
Oh, there's really no such thing anymore because essentially after Grandmaster Yip Man started teaching Wing Chun, and then you have all these students who are teaching in Hong Kong. After he passes away, more or less all of his students go on and they teach what they understood and how they interpret Wing Chun. So you basically have now multiple different streams, even just from the one source that we call Grandmaster Yip Man, and that's not even to mention all the other styles of Wing Chun in China. So right now it's completely fragmented. So it is more or less up to the individual association, the individual instructor. There is no governing body. They tried that in the past. It always fails horribly. Anytime they try to have a governing body over any kind of martial art, these things are pretty much always bound to fail. They tried to do it in JKD. I don't think they ever really gave it an earnest attempt in Wing Chun, but we all know what would happen if they tried. It would crash and burn miserably. Even just within my own line of Leung Ting Wing Chun, there's like a European way of doing it. There's a Hong Kong way of doing it. I suppose there's a New York way of doing it. And while we all come from the same source, and you could see within the DNA of our Wing Chun that it's more or less the same style, you're going to naturally see variations, even between teachers. The one instructor is more of a fighter. The other instructor is more technical. So they're going to emphasize those aspects. And that is naturally going to trickle down into the techniques. The expression of the techniques are going to be slightly different. The emphasis is going to be a little bit different. And if a qualified instructor feels the need to adapt something, change something, edit something, at this point, they should, in my opinion, feel free to do it, because there are no Wing Chun police that will issue tickets for an unauthorized change of the bong sao. If you decide there's a better way of doing it or another way that you prefer, as long as you can justify it, as long as it works, and in my opinion, as long as you admit that it's your change. Sometimes Wing Chun sifus have changed stuff, and rather than just admit, I kind of like doing it this way better, because then they feel that they're no longer traditional, they sometimes will create a story about how they secretly learned it from their sifu when no one was looking. So this thing that they do differently is still very traditional. You just weren't there when I learned it traditionally. So I figured if you're going to change something, just say, hey, I learned it this way from my Sivu, but in my experience, I don't think this way works really well. We should maybe do it on the other side or with the other leg forward. And as long as you can justify it, as long as it works, there are no Wing Chun police.
Okay, thanks for that. And lastly, I'd just like to ask you, what makes Wing Chun unique?
Wow. We generally all annoy the hell out of each other. We can't get along. No, wait, that kind of makes us like everyone else. What makes Wing Chun unique? We have really killer uniforms now. We don't really wear uniforms in Wing Chun. We're really, I don't know.
In terms of a style, yeah.
Truthfully, when you look at a lot of Southern Chinese martial arts, like I'm here on my ultimate Hong Kong Kung Fu tour. I brought my group here to take an amazing lesson with Mak Sivu, who I would love to get on the podcast someday. Which would be amazing.
Awesome.
And then he taught the students a little bit about how Hung Gar works in fighting. And when you really look at it, when you strip away the way the forms are taught, the framework, when it comes to the actual fighting, it's a lot more similar to Wing Chun than perhaps both Hung Gar people and Wing Chun people would care to admit. So I think, when it comes to fighting, like Bruce Lee said, you only have 2 hands and 2 legs. Ultimately, there's only certain types of ways of moving that are really functional when someone is trying to murder your face with their fist. So when it really comes down to it, they can't be that different and still be functional. But what people get really hung up about are the ornamental differences. The one style uses a stance this way, the other style trains this first, and then they do this, and people get they get very hung up on the differences. But I think at the root of it, at least within Southern Chinese martial arts, they're a lot more similar than they care to admit. And so I think what makes Wing Chun unique, I mean, of course, if I were a typical Wing Chun Sifu answering that question, we have simultaneous offense and defense, and we use overwhelming offense, and we get close. It's a close range fighting style, low line kicks or whatever, only to find out there are a bunch of other styles that do the same exact thing. So I wouldn't really say that those things make what we do differently. Wing Chun is very lucky. Wing Chun is lucky because we had Bruce Lee. All right. And I think any Wing Chun person that doesn't want to admit that is not really truly being honest.
Right.
To have someone like Bruce Lee come from our style and revolutionize the whole idea and the way people even looked at martial arts, and that they even started to look at Chinese martial arts. I think that if Bruce Lee had been a Hung Gar practitioner and had done the same thing, had been a Choi Lei Fut guy, then this conversation would be about another style. So as unique as, I love Wing Chun, it's what I teach, it's what I'm most obsessed about.
Yeah.
I think that I would be less than honest to say, if it were not for Bruce Lee, we wouldn't be in the position we're in. I wouldn't be talking about this. I wouldn't love coming to Hong Kong. I wouldn't be so fond of Chinese culture. I wouldn't have 2 daughters that are half Chinese. I think I owe so much to Bruce Lee. I wouldn't know Bay Logan. I wouldn't be a nerd about all this stuff. So we were very lucky. So while I would like to tell you what's different about the style, I think the honest answer is we had Bruce Lee. All right, Dre, I think we're at the final question right now. What do you got for me?
All right, Sifu, I have questions about...
Ooh. Wow, your French accent really improved across the episode.
Yeah, I tell you, his French accent's better now than it was before.
Yeah, that's
that other
amazing.
French accent you did was awful.
Yeah, it was just... this
wow.
is magnifique.
Merci beaucoup.
C'est pas problème, monsieur.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. So what do you got?
Yeah, I have a question about the 3 forms of Wing Chun.
Yes.
Can you tell me if they are to be taken literally, and if there's any symbolic language behind those forms?
Wow, I could probably spend an entire podcast answering that question. So by taken literally, you mean the way the form is done compared to the application?
Yeah.
Well, not really. I mean, when you look at the first form, Siu Nim Pao, which means little idea, it is, I suppose, like many Chinese martial arts, a somewhat abstract way of teaching movements. Western martial arts, generally, when they teach you how to fight, they say, okay, stand this way, put up your hands, I'm going to come at you with a punch, do this and this and this. The traditional Chinese way is a little bit different. We're going to start with form so we can develop a foundation. We're going to focus on body mechanics, breathing, posture, all of this kind of stuff that's very internal in that these are kind of almost like micro mechanics you have to think about and you have to get a feel without the stress of someone trying to punch you in the face. So you have ample opportunity to practice the movements and get good at them without immediately having to apply them. So the Siunum Tau form for sure is probably the most abstract out of all of them, but everything you learn in the form is applied in fighting and is in practice in fighting, although it may not look exactly like it does in the form. Sometimes people will say, hey, in the form you do it this way, but in fighting, you do it another way. How come it looks like it? Well, in fighting, we don't put our hands here when we're facing an opponent. So already the framework of the form is not at all like the way we would fight, whether we use a kind of classic on-guard position or use a more modern self-defense fence or even want to modify it into a kickboxing frame. We would never fight with our hands here. So already by the way the form is set up, it is teaching you movements and ideas and concepts and body mechanics in an abstract way. But if you have an instructor who can teach you that in detail, I think it's a very beautiful way to learn because it's something you can do when you don't have a partner. It's something you can go and focus on, and it gives you a lot of things to think about and develop over time. So although it is perhaps a longer way of looking at how can we teach someone to fight, I think the end result gives a little bit more depth than just simply learning in a more modern format. Not that I have anything wrong with a more modern format. As the forms go, they become slightly less abstract, but only slightly. The chumkyu, at least we're kicking and we're turning, so that even though we still don't apply those movements the same way in fighting as we would in the chumkyu, it at least is starting to look a little more like something in combat, so there's a little bit of a migration there. The BUG form, however, it kind of goes back to being a little bit more abstract again. The wooden dummy is perhaps the most contextualized to combat because now we have an apparatus in front of us so that when we move and when we do these movements, it looks more like the way we would use it in fighting, although even there, it's not exactly the same. So for example, when you look at a wooden dummy, you would see two arms like this. So most people would think, oh, the arm on this side must be the left arm of the opponent, but the dummy could also be representing something like this. So the arm that you think is the right arm is actually the left arm. Or when you hit 2 points on the dummy arm, maybe it's not 2 points on the arm, maybe it's 2 points on your partner's body. So if I turn this way here and hit the bottom arm and the top arm, it looks to someone like someone is holding their arms and I'm hitting their arms, but maybe in my mind, I'm hitting my opponent in the abdomen and in the collarbone, and I'm just using the arms as targets to train that power. So I wouldn't say the forms are really done literally. It's kind of a somewhat abstract way of learning it. And as long as you have an instructor who can teach you the right way, then you can learn it. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or here on YouTube through memberships. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm Seagung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
You're gonna get hot in here because that shit is coming through.
It's getting hot in here.
So take off all my clothing.
All right, should we clap it in?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Andrew's got the clap. All right.
Yeah.
Are we too loud or what?
Yeah, you were too loud, but that's not your fault. That's mine. So
Okay.
can you just
As
start
long
again?
as it's your fault, that's all okay.
Yeah. Just
Wait, should we have 2 Austrians in a row though?
No, we should not.
Yeah, we should break it up. We should have someone else. Nico, why don't you come in? Because I don't want to have 2 Austrians in a row. We need a Frenchman in here. And then I'm going to make fun of your French accent. And I'm going to say it's the worst French accent I've ever heard. Yeah, so don't worry about making noise because we'll just edit all this stuff out. Right, Andrew? You're going to edit all this stuff out, right? Yes.
Right, Andrew?
Hey, so we got another bald guy. So this guy looks a lot more like Dre.
None of your business.
Okay, one more time and angry.
Okay.
None of your business, okay?
A couple maybe just spring
No
to my
problem,
mind.
no problem.
It's just random.
Yeah, no, when Dre does it himself, it's all random, whatever comes out of his mouth. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or here on YouTube with blah, 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 blah. Oh, it's going to be a long one today. Don't worry. All right, okay.
Was it performance problems in front of an audience?
Yeah,
huh?
that's right. I'm not used to doing it in front of an audience. All right. It's never happened to me before. All right, here we go. All right. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or here on YouTube with. Are you kidding me?
Oh my
Are
God.
you kidding me? Oh my God. I never mess up. All right, here we go.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, live from Hong Kong.
We're not live. We're not live from Hong Kong.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all
sorts of hot nonsense from you. All sorts of hot nonsense from you.
None of your business.